Choosing Chaos, Solo Motherhood by Choice, the podcast for women who are done waiting for the one and ready to become the parent on their own damn terms. We're talking fertility, pregnancy, emotional chaos, and the village that it takes to raise a kid. Sometimes you're crying in the bathtub. Sometimes you're crying because your toddler bit you. And sometimes you cry because you chose all of this. Welcome to motherhood, solo style. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Choosing Chaos, Solo Motherhood by Choice. I'm your host, Laura, and as you can see, I'm not in my normal recording setting, but today is also not a normal, recording. This is a different kind of story today. I'm not sure if I'll post this, and I guess I don't know where to begin, but we'll begin somewhere, right? As many of you know, I have a little guy named Weston. He is just over a year old, and he is the absolute most amazing gift that I have ever received. I know that dating is very complicated, and a large part of my decision to become a single mom by choice is built on the foundation that I know that dating is very complicated, and through the stories that we share and we hear, it rings true for many of us. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter how old you are or what kind of work you do or anything, really. You could be the most beautiful person inside and out and still not have found the right person. And that's not our fault. It's all out of our control. Sorry, as you can see, this is going to be a hard episode for me. This is a different kind of story, as I mentioned, and it's not an easy one to tell, I guess, but I know that a lot of other women are experiencing similar journeys. So, with that said, I had conceived Weston when I was 38, delivered when I was 39. Is that right? Yeah, I think that's right. Anyway, so when I was 39, and he's, like I said, been the most amazing gift of my life. I cannot ask for anything better than to be his mama. He teaches me every day patience and love and kindness, and just how amazingly resilient and determined that our kids are to learn skills and be there for us as much as we are there for them, and just to be a part of our lives and make us happy. I mean, he's so funny already, and he's just over a year old. His little personality is certainly shining through. And my pregnancy was far from easy. My delivery was very long and complicated. But I lived to tell the story today. And then my postpartum, the early days were difficult. And in Andrea's story, you hear a little bit of my postpartum that I highlight on because her and I had very similar experiences with preeclampsia. Postpartum anxiety is real. It got the best of me a lot throughout my postpartum journey. And then I know I've said it before, or at least I think I've said it before, is postpartum depression is real. It hit me really hard when I went back to work. I sat at my desk for 2 weeks and really hated my job and hated having to return to work because I didn't have another income to fall back on. There were many other things that had led to just me feeling a certain way about returning to work. It's hard to be a working mom. It's hard to be a single mom by choice because we don't really have any other option. We don't have any other option, I should say, because we don't have that person to support us. And at times it would be great, but I don't think that I'm the type of person that couldn't work. I would have to work somehow, whether that be continue to expand this podcast and make it really successful. I hope it does grow, but volunteer, whatever that might look like, work a part-time job. I don't care. I don't think I could be a stay-at-home mom. I'm just not built for that. All the props to the moms out there who do that. I applaud them for doing that because it's not easy. But anyway, I've always been open to the potential of wanting another child. I wanted to wait until Weston was at least a year before I met with a fertility clinic and considered trying or began the journey of what that might look like to have another tiny human. Also, I noticed that we all say a lot when we're on these. As some ladies on this podcast have said, it's hard to know that we're getting older and our kids might potentially be an only child and they might not have a big village to lean into for support as they get older. And we certainly won't be around for forever because a lot of us are in our late 30s, early 40s. And, we only have so much time on this earth, unfortunately. And I know that Weston has cousins. They don't live the closest. They're about 40 minutes away. But he has friends, kids to hang out with. He doesn't get to see them that often, if I'm being completely honest, because of everybody's different schedules, work schedules, life schedules. It's all very different. So at times it's hard to sync up with other individuals and have somebody for him to play with. But anyway, in July, so a few months before Weston had turned 1, I met with a fertility clinic and decided, what do next steps look like for me? Does that mean starting all the way from the beginning and having things like the HSG and all the blood work again, and IUI, hoping that IUI would go the same way it did before, but maybe I wouldn't have to do as many tries. Maybe I would be a lot more successful in having an IUI cycle that worked on the first try, because we never know. And so had met with this clinic, a little boutique clinic in the area, whose name I will not say, but it's very different from the clinic I had seen before, which was a larger facility, very much a teaching facility, which ended up also being the hospital that I had an extension of that, all within the same network, being where I had delivered Weston as well. And if you're from the Pittsburgh area, you probably know where I'm talking about. But anyway, so met with them, ended up having to have a HSG as an update because my last one was 2 years ago. And this time it was a little bit different. The first time when I had done it through the other clinic, I laid there. They shot some saline up me and they just watched on a little ultrasound monitor what the saline was doing within my body and making the bubbles, as they say. They're looking for bubbles to form. And so this time I went to a facility and they also did the shooting the liquid, which I think this time was dye. And I had been warned the entire time leading up to this that it would be an extremely painful process, that I should take ibuprofen beforehand because it has been known to cause women a lot of discomfort, I was told some people would actually scream during it, which very unpleasant. I was not looking forward to that. But they do x-rays instead of doing the ultrasound. They inject the dye and they shoot a bunch of different x-rays to see how things are flowing within the body. And I didn't actually find it to be that uncomfortable, if I'm being quite honest. But I had spoken to the techs like right after they had done it, and I was like, I expected this to be way different, way more painful. Now, granted, I did have cramping after the fact, but not that severe. The text said, it used to be way different a few years back when they did it a different way. I don't know. But women used to be in an extremely uncomfortable state having had that done prior to newer technology, I guess you would say. So HSG was completed, bunch of blood work was completed, started monitoring. It's very weird. I didn't have to monitor my actual ovulation through this clinic, even though the physician had recommended I get the ovulation sticks, but it was never part of my protocol. We'll just say that. So we had discussed that we would do it day by day, start with an IUI and see where things went. I have plenty of sperm left. I made sure to buy a bunch in the beginning, just in case the first round with Weston didn't work out, that I would potentially want another child. So we agreed to do IUI to begin with. Sound like the best first step. Had worked before after 3 tries. And it was a success. Again, hormones were still regulating. Was thinking, why not just go for it? The facility monitored me via ultrasound and blood work, had brought me in, which felt like quite a lot. I don't remember it being that much when I was at the other clinic. Did the IUI, waited the 2 weeks for the results, and unfortunately was negative. And then so we immediately went into the next cycle, right? Did the IUI. I actually felt a little bit different after this next one. The ovaries had felt different. I felt like things might have been happening. Tested and negative. So at that point, I knew there was going to be a different conversation to be had with the physician. Do I personally want to keep going, knowing that I could go and go and go IUI and it might not work out for whatever reason, or I could switch to IVF. Not that it's a guarantee, but I only have so many vials of sperm left at this point, and one vial of sperm for IVF can get you further than one vial for IUI. Because they are able to, I just learned this through this process, they're able to take this sperm, the frozen sperm, scrape it, and then inject a little bit of it into the egg to then fertilize it. So, not that I wanted to do IVF, if I'm being honest. There's nothing about the process that sounds fun, but also it's expensive. Like we all talk about, it's very expensive. It is a lot of wear and tear on your body. I agreed to do a round of IVF and see where things went. And then all the monitoring begins, right? For IVF is they have you in constantly for blood work and ultrasounds, and it feels like it's every day, to be honest. So it is like a full-time job. We don't talk about that enough on these episodes, but IVF is basically a full-time job. It is a time commitment, that's for sure. But to add to that, with the blood work appointments and the ultrasound appointments, then you have the shots. And so this is where, actually, if I went back a little further in the first IUI, 2 IUIs, I noticed that the clinic I was going to felt very unorganized. There were things being missed. I was having to hound them for results on things. I was having to hound them for appointments that should have already been scheduled. I was having to chase them down to get my sperm sent there and understanding if my sperm had been received. I was having to call them to see about who the sperm bank was able to connect with to fill out paperwork stating that they were an authorized fertility clinic that was able to accept frozen sperm. And it took longer than it should have on a Friday out of my day to chase somebody down to get the phone answered and have them complete this paperwork that needed to be done by a 2:00 deadline so that my sperm could be sent out that day and be received Monday morning when my IUI was supposed to take place. Imagine the panic and the anxiety of going through all of that. Not something I wanted to add to my plate, if I'm being completely honest. But that aside, I noticed that there were other things that had come up through my time with this clinic that just felt frustrating, maybe is the best way to say it, because I felt that as the patient, I shouldn't have been the one telling them how to do their jobs. That aside. When it came to my medications for beginning the IVF cycle, that became a huge ordeal. My son was in surgery, getting his ear tubes done, and my phone is blowing up from a nurse calling and texting me about the medications that I need for the IVF cycle to begin for the retrieval process. And I'm notifying her back, letting her know that I am in the middle of something. I'm unable to talk. My son is having surgery. She continues going, which is very unfortunate. With my company, I have to go through a specific pharmacy in order to get my prescriptions filled, not go through a third party or a more private company, because that's not covered for me. And because of everything that was going on and my head just wasn't there, they filled my prescription through this private pharmacy, and the bill ended up being like $7,000 or something, which IVF is insanely expensive, and we need to have an episode on why that is and why we have not gotten to a place in our society where we understand that infertility is an issue, but that we need to find a way to help women get IVF medications at a lower cost, because why is it insanely expensive? No, there is absolutely no reason for it to cost as much as it does. So I get that $7,000 bill, I pay it, and then I'm like, wait. I check with my nurse through my healthcare insurance, and I'm like, am I supposed to be getting them filled through this pharmacy or this pharmacy? And she tells me, no, not that pharmacy. That's a private pharmacy. You don't want to be going through them because you're going to be paying out of pocket. You need to be going through this other pharmacy. You won't pay as much, but it'll be mostly covered. So I call that first pharmacy, and I'm like, don't ship anything. I think I have to cancel this order. And I call the nurse from the fertility clinic, let her know that I can't be having them filled through this pharmacy. They need to go through this other pharmacy. I called the first pharmacy back, the specialty pharmacy, and I'm like, you have to cancel this order. Thankfully, I got refunded for that money. But I was like, cancel this. Ended up getting in contact with a nurse, telling her to fill through this other pharmacy. And she supposedly does so, but then I have to call the pharmacy and see where things are at and approve the authorization for it. And so I call, and they have no record of my medication anywhere. Long story short, it somehow got messed up. The doctor at the clinic and the nurse both, it took longer than it should have. We'll say that. It took days, because it was just like chasing them down, chasing the insurance company down, back and forth, back and forth. My medications arrive. I am set to begin them in a few days. I'm going through my medications, and I understand that one of the medications was not even placed on my order, and therefore was never shipped to me. This was frustrating. I was not happy, and I think that day or the day after, I had an appointment anyway, and so it was very clear with the doctor that this should not have happened, that somebody dropped the ball, and I felt as though, one, I was being treated differently, because if I go back in time to when I was getting my IUIs done, I did feel like at this clinic I was being just treated like a number. Even though it was a smaller boutique clinic, I certainly felt like women who were going through IVF were being treated much differently by the clinical staff than I personally was as an IUI patient. You can tell, you can feel a certain way when you're sitting there observing how clinical staff treats one patient versus another. It's very clear. I was already not feeling the best because of the mistake from the medicine. So we go into the physician's office, and she sits me down, and a lot of things were said that made me incredibly uncomfortable. Like, the medicine mistake took far too much out of the physician's time, and it should have never happened. And not sure what the nurse did, but also that the physician had to spend too much time on the phone that then took away from patients, and that the physician's not even being paid for the medicine. And so this was too much of her time spent on trying to resolve something that was their mistake. And so I had been frustrated at this point and was very clear that, hey, I'm feeling this way. I feel like I'm being treated differently here. This mistake had happened. I'm feeling all these hormones because of the whole process in general. I also feel like maybe this clinic is not the best clinic for me, that there is some disorganization happening here. And the response in so many words was that I'm unlike most patients because I am very on top of things, whereas most patients are not, which I find that very hard to believe in a fertility journey, that any woman is dropping the ball at any point in time, because this is like a timed science. Stealing Kristen's phrase there, but it really is like a timed science, and it's not within our control. It's not within the physician's control either. I find it very hard to believe that women would be dropping the ball on a very important process or journey within their lives. Knowing how much it costs, knowing the time commitment that is spent for any process, IUI or IVF. But I continued forward because they had already had my sperm. They had already began the process. I was already starting the shots at this point, and monitoring was happening. It was too late. In my mind, I felt like it was too late to switch to different fertility clinics. This is where I'm going to say that IVF, it does a number to your body. You are injecting your body so much, so many times a day with different drugs. You're swelling, you're feeling discomfort, you are bruising, you're running out of places to do shots. You're not feeling like yourself because your hormones are all over the place, that you're not able to control it. You 1 minute could be raging and the next minute be crying your eyes out. But we do it anyway because we want to be moms. We say that all the time on this podcast, is we just wanted to be a mom. And again, I'm extremely grateful for having become Weston's mama. I wouldn't trade that kid for the world. My mother knew this time about this journey of mine because I didn't want to do it alone. I also needed help watching Weston while I was going to some appointments. And for an IVF retrieval, you have to be put under, and therefore you cannot drive yourself home. IVF retrieval day, feel like things are great. I'm feeling extremely optimistic. Not as swollen as I had expected that I would be. However, extremely uncomfortable. That day I didn't feel too bad until later in the evening, and I think everything just kind of hit me where I wanted to throw up. I felt like I had to go to the bathroom every 5 minutes or so. It was extremely uncomfortable. I'm glad my mom was here to help take care of Weston because I felt like I was dying that evening. And it didn't really get much better the following days. I'm apparently part of the 1% that carries extra fluid when you're going through a retrieval process. So I had to be put on additional drugs to take on a daily basis. But I had extreme discomfort, swelling, cramping, constipation, which is not fun, ladies. I recommend starting magnesium citrate the day that you have your retrieval. The days to come were ups and downs because you're waiting to see, okay, well, how many eggs did they retrieve? How many of your eggs matured? How many fertilized? And then it goes the whole way down to blastocyst, blah, blah, blah. And my numbers I felt were pretty good. I felt that by days 3 and 4, we were in a good place. I felt by day 5, we were in a great place, and the embryologist seemed extremely optimistic. And then they gave a few of them like one more day to just observe them, and some did make it to day 6. Other ones did not do anything day 6 or 7, blah, blah, blah. That said, I received a phone call around days 3 or 4 from the physician, I don't remember, that the expectation is 70% of the eggs would fertilize, and however 75% of my eggs did not fertilize. It was about 55% of my eggs, I think, fertilized, which supposedly was not good enough. And then began to contribute to, well, you are older. Okay, yes, I am. I'm 40. Thank you for reminding me. But let's rewind to a few weeks prior when you said, oh, I have 25-year-old ovaries and tons of eggs growing in there, and that everything looked healthy. But I know quality versus quantity are two very different things. So quantity in my case was not as good as quality in the end. I know that quality and quantity are very important things, but her expectation was 70% would mature and fertilize, but we weren't at that. Embryologist again seemed a lot more optimistic. Every conversation I had with her, she reminded me that it is quality over quantity, and that is extremely important, and that she was very optimistic about where things were going. This particular facility does not give you an option to not do PGTA testing. They send them out to the lab, you pay the money, and then they do the 1 to 2 weeks for testing and get back to you. 1 week in, I have, I think, a follow-up appointment with the physician saying they've been tested. They're almost done. They're just waiting on a few more to test, and then they're waiting on the report. A few days go by. I don't hear anything. A few more days go by. I don't hear anything. And then I get an email about a little over 2 weeks out. In the middle of the night, of all things, I get an email from the lab, and I read it. One, all boys. I ended up having 5 embryos that they had sent out for testing. All 5 were boys. So I guess I'm supposed to be a boy mama. Sadly, none of them were healthy enough to proceed forward. And so the fertility physician had called me later that morning because I was actually supposed to go in for an appointment to begin the transfer process. She called me and said that she had really bad news and that none of them were going to be healthy enough to proceed forward. I don't know what all that means. As far as the chromosomal testing goes, I know that there's a lot of conflicting opinions on whether PGTA testing is a guaranteed science or not, whether it does or doesn't predict any sort of chromosomal abnormalities within an embryo. That aside, again, didn't really have an option. And in that conversation, I felt more and more defeated because the physician basically said to me that my 5 embryos had chromosome abnormalities because of my age, and that the reason my IUIs didn't work was because of my age. And then to add to that, I am, in the physician's words, I am very blessed to have been able to conceive, carry, and deliver Weston when I was 38, because a lot of women aren't able to do that at that age, and that the quality of my eggs is not good. I was given 24 hours to make a decision as to whether I wanted to begin the next IVF cycle or what I wanted to do. And 24 hours is not a lot of time to make a big decision like that, I guess we would say. So I obviously feel and have felt a certain way because this is newer news. And when you guys hear this won't be as new as it is. One, I feel that the whole time I've been at this clinic I've been stressed. I've been under stress because I'm managing them in a way. I also feel like the comments keep coming up about how old I am, and then that is going to continue to work against me. And as much as that might be true, there are so many stories that we hear throughout the women that have been on this podcast to talk to us about their journeys. And some are very difficult, and yes, it does take time. And others are extremely successful, and it doesn't take as much time. I think that my age is continuously brought up and making me feel a certain way. And so 24 hours, again, is not a lot of time. I ended up asking to at least have the time to spend with my son through the holidays so that I can enjoy it with him and not have to worry about the appointments and the shots and the next retrieval and stress of all that and figuring out X, Y, and Z. I know that it's Weston's first Christmas that he's going to really enjoy, and I want to be with him to enjoy the holiday season. And so I asked if I could just be given enough time to consider maybe starting the next cycle in January, because that gives me enough time to decide, do I want to keep going down this path of trying for number 2, knowing that my age might continue to work against me? Do I want to continue with this clinic, or are there other clinics in the area that I maybe want to switch to or go back to the one I was at previously? And the experience might be a little bit different. It might not change the quality of my eggs, but it might change the stress that I've been under while undergoing this fertility journey here. But it's not been easy, if I'm being honest. When I had the conversation with the physician, I think it hadn't hit me yet. But as the day went on, it became very hard for me to consider what I will do next. Do I want to keep going down this path? And it might just continue to end up being the same thing, as where I don't have embryos at the end of all of that to even go through a transfer. Or do I try another round and see how it goes? Things that hold me back are, one, that was a lot to my body. That was a lot for me mentally, emotionally, physically. And granted, it was just a few weeks of time, but it was extremely hard. And the post-retrieval, I would say some of the pain that I had endured was worse than being in labor, which sucks to say that. And then to also add to that is, am I robbing my son of a potential sibling in the future? Is he going to grow up and be mad at me because I didn't give him that? Is he going to wish that he wasn't an only child? Because at times you do hear a lot of only children saying that they wish they had had what their friends had and had siblings, be able to give that to him. And that hurts me because I want him to have people alongside him as he gets older to spend time with, because I won't be here for all of those things. And that sucks, right? I love him so much, and I don't ever want him to think that, one, I'm replacing him, but and by bringing in another child, which I know is a crazy thought, but that has crossed my mind, is I don't want him to think that I'm doing all of this to replace him, because I love him so much, but I also don't want to rob him of having I don't know if my body will let me. And so I really wish that I could go back in time. And I know we can't do that. I wish I could go back in time and I could start sooner. I wish I would have started sooner. And we hear that from a few other ladies through these conversations, is I wish I would have done it sooner. And so if you're out there listening and you're considering this journey, don't wait, because you don't want to get to your later 30s and you don't want to go through as much stress or all the struggles that a lot of us have been going through. Start sooner. If I would have started when the thought even came into my head and I was like 32 years old, I should have started and considered then. But I wasn't in a financially good place. I was living in a city where I barely knew anybody. I didn't have a good support system there. It would have been all the wrong reasons to have a kid. But I would have made it work, right? We make it work no matter what the circumstances are. There's one thing that I could say to you, if you're listening, is that do it. Just do it. Don't wait, because you just don't know what the future is ahead, what the journey holds for you ahead. As much as I'm in this process of healing, and we don't talk enough, and I want to add to this that we don't talk enough about the loss of embryos. We talk a lot about miscarriage and other types of loss, but we don't talk about the loss of embryos and how that feels, because you worked so hard to get to that point. And then they're just discarded. And you don't know what happens to them. But there are 5 little boy embryos out there somewhere that belonged to me. And so that's really hard for me. But again, we don't talk enough about that. And I think that might be a really great episode to have with some other women who have gone through IVF. And so again, I'm in this phase right now where I'm trying to figure out what the next steps look like for me. None of this is easy for any of us. Infertility sucks, but we're all along for the ride in one another's journey. I want to thank each and every one of you for being a part of this podcast and sharing your stories. They really do help, especially in these moments where some of us might face a little bit more difficulty than others. It really helps to hear the stories and to be able to reach out to others who have shared their stories so far, or who might be experiencing the same thing outside of those individuals. We're building a community here, and I'm very grateful
to have started this podcast and be sharing this journey with all of you along the way, because you are making it what it is. As much as I'm brave for doing this, you're all brave for sharing your stories with me and allowing the world into a glimpse of your life and vulnerable moments and difficult moments and hard conversations. It's been truly inspiring to meet each and every one of you and hear your stories. As much as I know a lot of you have thanked me for doing this, I want to thank you. And I will also keep you posted down the road on where my journey goes. And I'm not sure when I'll share that and how I'll share that and what that might look like for me. So thank you for following along with me on this journey. As much as this conversation was extremely difficult for me to have, I do feel a little bit better having gotten it out there. If you liked what you heard today, go ahead and hit that follow and subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. And if you're feeling generous, leave a review. But otherwise, go over to TikTok, Patreon, or Instagram and follow along with us there. So until next time, stay grounded, ask the weird questions, give yourself grace. This is one that I can learn today. And most importantly, keep choosing the chaos. Thank you.